Next, we'll go to hypothesis test for population proportion. If you still remember in chapter 8, we have discussed when n multiply p is greater than and equal to 5 and n multiply 1 minus p is greater than and equal to 5, then we can use the population proportion formula, which is sample population minus the population proportion, divide the square root of the population proportion, multiply 1 minus p, divide n sample size. To compute the sample proportion, PS is equal to number of success in sample divide the sample size, where the mean for the sample proportion is equal to the mean for the proportion, and standard deviation is equal to square root of p multiply 1 minus p divide n. Step 6 is making decision whether we want to reject or do not reject the null hypothesis. Step 7, making conclusion. For example, we have enough or sufficient evidence. This is the keyword, and normally by referring to this keyword, I will give 1 mark. Again, conclusion, we have enough or sufficient evidence to conclude that or to support or to accept the alternative hypothesis at significance level, and this significance level normally I will give in questions. Okay, or we have not enough or insufficient evidence to conclude that the statement in alternative hypothesis at significance level 1%, 5% or 10%. And this is the overview, the 7 step in hypothesis testing. This 7 step is very important. Don't miss any step because every step have mark. For example, hypothesis testing, normally 2 marks. Stick the significance level, which you just need to copy from your questions, 1 mark. Find the critical value and so on. All these have mark. Making conclusion, normally 1 to 2 marks. Okay. Again, please don't miss or skip any step. Now, we will go to the first scenario by using example. We'll discuss it. For example, if the standard deviation is known. For example, tester claim that the true mean number of TV set in Malaysia homes is equal to 3, and the standard deviation is given equal to 0.8. A random sample of 100 homes is selected with the mean number of TV set equal to 2.84. So, if the question asks you, test the claim. And the claim is this one. Then how we do that? First step, stick the null and alternative hypothesis. Since the question said equal, so equal. Null hypothesis, mean equal to 3. Alternative, mean not equal to 3. And since we have equal and not equal signs, therefore there is a true till text. Step 2, specify the significance level. Since normally the question will give you at 5% significance, 10% significance, or 1% significance. So just copy alpha. For example, this question, alpha equal to 0.05 or 5% significance. Step 3, decision rule. Reject null hypothesis if the test statistic is less than or more than the critical value. Otherwise, do not reject the null hypothesis. Step 4, find the critical value. Based on the table that I upload in Spectrum, when alpha equal to 0.05, the z value is positive negative 1.96. Why positive negative 1.96? Because just now here, based on the hypothesis testing, we know there is equal sign, not equal sign for hypothesis, and there is a true till text. So step 5, compute the test statistic. Since we know the sample size is 100, n equal to 100, population standard deviation sigma is 0.8. Therefore, we use z-tags, and this is the formula for z-tags. Z equal to the sample mean minus the population mean, which is 2.84 minus 3, divide the standard deviation, 0.8, divide the square root of, and n is 100. Therefore, we'll get negative 2.0. Step 6, decision making. So negative 2.0 is less than negative 1.96. So that's in the rejection region. Step 7, conclusion. This is sufficient evidence that the mean number of TV in Malaysia home is not equal to 3. 1 mark. Okay. Now, if the question asks you, find the p-value. If the question asks you to find the p-value, p-value is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis given that the alternative hypothesis is true after the hypothesis testing is implemented. And p-value is the actual probability for type 1 error has been made by the researcher after the conclusion is drawn. If the p-value is less than the alpha, reject the null hypothesis. If the p-value is greater than and equal to alpha, do not reject the null hypothesis. So, for example, just now we repeat the 7th step. After that, we have to find the p-value, referring to the z value that we have, negative 2.0. So, we can get the p-value from table, which is 0.02275. Since this is a 2-tube text, so we multiply 2. If this is a 1-tube text, no need to multiply 2. Then we get 0.0455. Since the p-value equal to 0.0455, which is less than alpha, therefore reject the null hypothesis. Second scenario. When the population standard deviation is unknown, sample size is large. For example, a food industry manager thinks that the customer's monthly cell phone bill have increased and now average over 52 ringgit per month. The company wished to test this claim by using a random sample of 64 customers' monthly bill with mean equal to 53.1 and standard deviation of 10. So the first step, hypothesis. Since the question said, okay, here, 52 and keyword increase. So we know that there is 1-tube text. Mean is greater than, why greater than? Because we have keyword increase here, 52. While null hypothesis will be opposite side. Mean is less than and equal to 52. Step 2, find the rejection region. Since the question said alpha equal to 0.1, therefore referring to the table, we get 0.1 for 1-tube text is 1.28. Reject the null hypothesis if the z-text value statistic is greater than 1.28. Otherwise, do not reject the null hypothesis. Since the sample size is large and the population standard deviation is unknown, so we still can use z-text again to differentiate when we want to use z-text and t-text is based on the sample size. If n, the sample size is large, z. N, or the sample size is small meaning that less than 30, we use t. Okay, so this question, z-text, then we can get 0.88. Then, referring to the table, 0.88, which is in here, do not reject, non-rejection region. Therefore, we can conclude that do not reject the null hypothesis since z statistic is equal to 0.88, which is less than 1.28. Therefore, we can conclude that not sufficient evidence that the mean bill is over 52 ringgit. Okay. Now, if the question asks you, please find the p-value, then we can calculate the p-value. So, probability of X bar is greater than and equal to 53.1. Then 53.1 minus this is the sample mean minus the population mean 52, divide and so on, we'll get the 0.88. This is the first 7 steps that we use. Based on this value, we can calculate the p-value, which is 0.1894. Therefore, we can conclude that do not reject the null hypothesis since the p-value is equal to 0.1894. And since this is one t-test, no need to multiply 2. And that's all for second scenario. Next, we'll go to the third scenario.